Life is only what we choose to make it. Let's just take it. Let us be free. We can find the glory we all dream of. And with our love, we can win. Hi, this is my review of Robotech, the role-playing game, the Macross Saga. Robotech needs no introduction, but just in case, I'm going to give you a small summary of what this awesome anime series is all about. You could say that at its essence, it's a story of war, but it's much more than that. It's a story of human drama, of emotions, of rivalries, of hate and love, and of a conflict between the Lethality, which are these aliens that are driven completely on natural selection, on survival of the fittest, on the strong will rule over the weak, and the humans. Humans have managed to attain a certain degree of peace between the entire people of the planet, thanks to a very important event. A huge spaceship crash landed on Earth, and this vessel contained the secrets of protoculture, a source of fuel and technology that has enabled humanity to take titanic steps forward in terms of science and technology, and this has also affected all other aspects of humanity's life. However, humanity also learned about the Lethality that are coming to Earth because they are not very happy with humans having this technology that they are not worthy of, at least according to their point of view. So it is within this conflict that humans and Lethality will come to learn that they are not too different from one another. In fact, they share some sort of common ancestry. And I can tell you right from the start that this is one of the best role-playing games when it comes to translating an entire anime series into a tabletop RPG format. Now, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. I have a few criticisms about the PDF. One is a nitpick. This is one of those documents that has the cover in a separate file. At least you do not have to save the thumbnail from, for example, if you get it from DriveThruRPG. But I would have liked it if the cover was included with the main document. I also must inform you that this book is going to be available as a physical book, not just as a digital file. So if you want it like that, it will be available perhaps by the end of this year. Now, another criticism is that I did find a few typos, not too many. I managed to spot about 3 or 5 throughout the entire document. There aren't too many, but I thought I should mention that. And the font for some of the headlines looks slightly pixelated or not too easy to read. And in terms of graphic design, there are some blurry areas as well. My final criticism is that even though the illustrations look great, and I will talk more about the art style, sometimes I feel like there is a bit too much of a difference when compared to the original character designs. Sometimes the eyes are either too large for the type of character that they are trying to represent. Sometimes the eyes are too far apart. Sometimes they have a really long neck. And I know that in anime you have this small mouth, big eyes sort of style. But in Robotech there are some very specific character designs that I think, well, were too altered in some of the illustrations in this book. Now let's talk about the good things of the quality. The entire document is very well organized. This is a somewhat crunchy system. There are some optional rules to streamline some things, but in general this is a very robust, highly structured system. But thanks to the great organization, it's going to be very easy for you to understand the entire thing. Perhaps there could have been some improvements when it comes to certain game concepts. That is, if you do not understand something, just read on and everything will become clear. But in general, I really like the organization and how everything is well written and explained. The document is also fully bookmarked, so it's going to be very easy for you to move through the entire book. I also like the illustrations despite of what I said. This is probably some of the best anime type art that I have seen,
because this is not easy to reproduce in many instances when it comes to role-playing games. Sometimes you see these anime and manga themed role-playing games, and they cannot nail the correct art style when it comes to the illustrations, the art in general. But in the case of this Robotech rulebook, I think they do a great job despite my criticisms. Another great thing that I decided to mention in this quality section of the review instead of the contents is that this rulebook contains a lot of fiction. You have two major pieces of fiction and a lot of fragments and paragraphs, all sorts of dialogues, thought processes, interviews concerning the game world, the main characters, and they do not feel like it's just some sort of fan fiction. It actually feels like part of the Robotech lore. Sometimes, through fiction applied after several years have passed, it's somewhat difficult to approach the original spirit of the series, but I think these pieces of fiction, they manage to get you into the setting, to pull you in, and even if you have been a long time Robotech fan, I think that it's going to be very easy for you to experience these pieces of fiction as part of the original mythology. So in general terms, despite some of my criticisms, I think the quality is good.
As the battle goes on, we feel stronger. How much longer must this go on? Each and every day we dream of winning and beginning a new life.
Now, let's talk about the contents. The book starts giving you an introduction to what Robotech is, how to take your first steps into this universe. As I told you at the beginning, it's about surviving. Humanity has gotten its hold on this huge spaceship known as the Super-Dimensional Fortress, and they have gotten this technology, this way of using proto-culture to improve their lives in different ways, but they also got aware that the Sent-Ready, who consider war the only way of existence, are moving towards planet Earth. It's going to take them 10 years to get to the planet, so the people on Earth must prepare to defend their world. Now, one of the great things about this role-playing game is that you can play as any of the heroes from the Macross Saga. If you want to play as Rick Hunter or Roy Fokker or even the villains, and even personnel that do not participate so actively in combat when compared to some of the fighters in the series, you can play as any one of those. And because this system handles drama as well as conflict, you can also have some really interesting, exciting, and intriguing adventures outside of battle. This system uses 6-sided dice to resolve all sorts of checks and tests and conflicts. You basically create a dice pool, but you never modify the dice pool. The only modification that exists is how successes are tallied after rolling. We'll talk more about that later on. So to generate successes, you need to roll 5 or above. 5 equals 1 success, 6 equals 2 successes, but 1, 2, or 3, you gain no successes, and typically when you roll 4, you also do not get successes. So for example, if you rolled, let's say, 3 dice, and you rolled a 2, a 4, and a 6, you only generate 2 successes because of the 6 that you rolled. And when you need to round a value, you always round down to the lower value. You also have a section detailing how to play fast. If you want to get started right away, this will point you to the right page, to the right direction on how to understand your character, how to build a character, how to handle challenges, how to manage stress, actions, and equipment. So it's all very handy, very useful to have if you want to get started right away, the same day that you purchase this RPG. You also have information on the basics of the Robotech universe, the timeline, the universe itself, offensive technology, and technology that is just there to improve the daily lives of people. They pretty much have everything covered. Then you have a section detailing key concepts of the game. You will find information on both the fiction, but also on different points and areas of the rule set, so that you can understand how vehicles play into each encounter, the different concepts of armor, different ways to solve conflicts, even simultaneous conflicts. You also have information on particular details concerning the physiology of the participants in Robotech. For example, Centredi, as many of you know, are giants when compared to humans. So here you have information on those details. And there's also information on robotechnology, which encompasses everything related to culture, to scientific advancement, research and development. You also have information on the micronization process, on how a Centredi could be reduced to the size of a human. And all of this technology was reverse engineered from the dimensional fortress that crash landed on Earth, and it has a huge impact over the entire planet and its inhabitants. And of course, because war is such an important part of Robotech, you also have information on how this affected military matters, bringing about new ways to generate or create artificial intelligence, energy weapons, vehicles known as Veritechs, which are a staple of the Robotech series. You have these huge robots that you can pilot, and of course, you have information on the 3 types of modes that you can engage when piloting a Veritech. So for example, in fighter mode, you're kind of like a plane, and this is perfect for fast-paced air battle or space combat even. You also have the Batloid configuration that looks sort of like a humanoid type of robot, and you can wield weapons with it and manipulate all sorts of things as if you were a giant-sized human. So this is very useful to fight the Centredi that are much larger than humans. You also have this hybrid mode known as the Guardian, which is a sort of combination between the two, half fighter, half walking mecha. So in this mode, the robot can use its hands, but it can also travel at high speed, but it's not as maneuverable as the Batloid mode, which is as agile as a dexterous human would be. If a human was made out of metal, of course, and if that human was a giant. You also have information on different barriers, the process of micronization, of cloning. Later on, you have information how to create a hero. So if you wanted to play as a human or a Centredi, you could have an entire campaign featuring a specific point of view. The way that the Centredi look at the conflict, or the way that the humans try to survive that war. You also have information on career, which is what defines your hero, what your hero has specialized on doing. You also have a nature, which is basically the methods that you use to accomplish your goals. It has a lot to do with your personality and psychology. You also have skills, all of that in which you train in your career, what you are good at. You also have the element, which describes when you operate at your best. Different types of situations related to skills could give you an advantage over your enemies or any situation that you are taking on. You also have talents, which are basically quirks or special abilities that you have beyond your skill. You also have wounds, telling you about how tough your hero is. You also have speed, how much ground you can cover when moving. You also have stress, which builds up as you confront different dramatic situations and you become fatigued. This system actually has a very interesting way on handling drama and fatigue. So drama arises from trouble in interpersonal relationships. This could be some sort of situation that could arise when interacting with a colleague, with a friend, with a rival, with family, with your enemies, and this will have an impact later on, and I will talk more about that in a few moments. You also have fatigue, which is gained from fighting and seeing your friends hurt or killed, so it gets you really exhausted, and you have to keep track of these both resources so that they do not hinder your progress later on. If you accumulate too much drama, when you least expect it, those conflicts, those clashes, those issues that could have been avoided perhaps will come into surface, perhaps even during battle, and they could spell your doom. So it's better to solve those problems either by eliminating the threat or by making peace with it, either working completely on your side or perhaps negotiating with the other party that shares that drama with you, or if it's the only way, you'll have to eliminate the source of that drama. And when it comes to fatigue, it's very important to rest appropriately, to not get into unnecessary conflicts or combat that directly affects you physically or psychologically in a very severe way, so that your character does not break down. You also have information on concepts that we will cover later on in this review, such as burnout, which is basically the maximum amount of focus you can place into a task. You have heroic move that allows you to perform special actions in times of crisis. You also have information on equipment, on the ranks as you go up and down in a particular career. You also have fame, how it could increase as you accomplish different tasks and feats. You also have proficiencies, which is basically an exhaustive training in operations of mecha, vehicles, kits, specialized equipment, and you also have information on mecha, its variations or variants, and vehicles. Now let's take a closer look at the steps to build a character. Without getting too much into the concepts, we will go into those later on in this review. The first step is reviewing the story of your character. It has to make sense with the type of adventure, with the type of campaign that the game master is running. Then you choose if you want to play as a human or as a centredi. Then you choose a career. You could be an entertainer, a marine, an officer, a pilot, a spy, a technician, or a volunteer. Then you record your rank and fame, your equipment, your proficiencies, you select your element, and then you select your career talents. Following that, you have to select your skills. And then you apply skill points. There are a few ways to do this. You can either choose an array, so that your character is more specialized or focused or versatile, depending on how you apply these arrays. But it could also be free-form, that is, you could have 15 points to spread as you see fit amongst your skills. You could also handle it as variable rolling. You could roll dice and see what random amount you get when it comes to skill points. And this could be handled in a grittier way by applying a modifier to the dice that you roll so that you get less points. Then you can create your nature, that is, choosing terms that describe your disposition and your demeanor. Then you select a talent, you record your health, your burnout, your speed, and you enhance your character with more points. Maybe you want to choose another talent or a new skill, or you want to increase your fame or rank. We will cover those later on in this review. And when it comes to playing as a human or a centredi, there are several choices. Maybe you are a human, but you have defected to the side of the centredi, so now you have undergone this process to become a giant like them. But maybe you're a centredi and you are on the side of humans, and now you have chosen to become a Micronian. But it could also be the other way around. Maybe you have defected, but you decided to stay as a giant in case you are a centredi, or as a human, maybe you decide to betray humans, and now you're on the side of centredi, but you still remain as a Micronian, maybe as a spy. But of course, you can also handle things quite straightforward by being a human on the side of humans or a centredi on the side of centredi. Now let's take a closer look at careers. They are pretty self-explanatory. An entertainer is basically a star, someone with an alluring personality. A marine is someone who is keeping the peace, defending populations. The officer is someone who is responsible for making the hardest choices. The pilot is all about handling war machines. The spy is about assimilation and adapting, infiltration and hacking. Then you could be a technician. You select a discipline and you specialize in it. Maybe you fix different vehicles, or maybe you can heal people. You could also be a volunteer. This is someone who is not specialized in almost anything. This type of character got dragged into the conflict, and you can perform several duties, and despite your lack of expertise, you are focused on saving humanity. Now let's talk about some of the elements of these different careers. When it comes to a pilot, you have the ace pilot element. You're not just any pilot, you are the best. Your reflexes and battlefield awareness are second to none. You could also be a squadron leader. You have been assigned to lead a small mecha squadron and are responsible for the lives of those assigned to your unit. Or you could be a wingmate. You have been trained to cover your squad mates and ensure that they are protected. Next, we have the officer elements. You have things such as exemplar. As a leader, you believe that the path of true leadership is performed through example. You could be a marshal. You lead through inspiring those around you. Those near you strive for perfection and give it their all. Or you could be a coordinator. A true leader uses every advantage possible. All personnel, environmental features, any sort of system. And let me pause this for a bit, because what I really like of these elements related to careers is that a single career could feel quite different from the others just by changing the element. Of course, there are other factors to make your character feel quite unique, but for example, in the case of an officer, you would think that it would be somewhat of a passive role in some occasions, but if, for example, if you're an exemplar who is constantly leading by example, your role is going to be quite active and on the field, quite different perhaps from marshal or a coordinator that are a bit outside of the main battle and are using resources, strategizing and handling tactics. Then we have the technician. You have elements such as doctor. You have spent a lifetime training, learning how to heal others. You could be an engineer with a talent for creating and repairing hardware and software systems. Or you could be a scientist, dedicating your life to uncovering the mysteries of the universe. When it comes to entertainer, you only have the performing element, but this could be anything. This could be singing, dancing, playing an instrument, so this single element is quite versatile. When it comes to being a spy, you have the elements of shade, working from the shadows. You're never seen or known until you make your mark. Or you could be of the element in plain sight. With a gentle smile and nondescript appearance, you get the job done hiding in plain sight. Or you could be a copycat, a master of everything. You learn to be anyone at any time and do anything. So this spy could be someone that is a special ops type of character, or you could be a socialite pretending to be something that you are not while you are gathering information. On the case of the Marine, you have elements of lone wolf, respecting the ability of your military peers, but you believe that you can do it better alone. You could be an assaulter. Hundreds of rounds fly around you, but you are right at home. You are at the thick of battle. Then you have the suppressor. You stay close to your squad, defending and supporting them. When it comes to the volunteer, you have elements such as introvert. You are so focused on a favorite topic that you fail to notice the outside world. You could be a caretaker. You are driven into service due to your empathy. Or you could be an adrenaline junkie. You answer the call to live on the edge where excitement exists in its purest form. So when it comes to being a volunteer, this is a perfect type of career to choose if you want to play as that archetypical, perhaps anime character that knows almost nothing about the conflict and suddenly gets dragged into the thick of things and eventually becomes something better, because in this system you can change your career, your rank. You can see character development and growth quite literally, thanks to the way that the system integrates theme with mechanics. And in this section they also give you tips and advice on how to create other archetypes. Archetype suggestions that could be related to the other careers that were previously mentioned. So you could be an acolyte or an assassin, you could be a noble or a mobster, or you could be a shopkeep, an investigator. The possibilities are endless. Then we have a section detailing nature. As I mentioned before, this is about how you act and present yourself to others. You are allowed to choose two terms that describe your nature, which is composed of your disposition and demeanor. Disposition is how you think and feel about things, how you position yourself around events and other people, but demeanor is how you act, how the world perceives you. So disposition could be like an inner aspect of your character, and demeanor is the outside appearance of your character. You have an example of types of natures that you can choose from. Maybe you are an analyst, maybe you are a backstabber, you could be calm or cowardly or reckless, you could be a showboat or solemn. So by choosing from any of these things or coming up with your own types of disposition and demeanor, your inner self could be quite different from your external appearance. And you can use your nature to reroll a challenge that you failed at. So you have to talk with your game master, declaring how your disposition or your demeanor applies to a certain task or situation, and if it makes sense, you will be able to make that reroll, but you can only do this once per encounter. Now, when it comes to rank, this is determined by, for example, your military position within another hierarchy inside of the Centraedi or the UEDF, that is the humans. So you have a value that ranges from 0 to 6, and higher values are associated with a higher position, of course, giving you access to better gear and equipment. And when it comes to the title, This is about commanding respect. This will give you greater influence when you are communicating with other characters within that hierarchy and perhaps even outside of it. However, this position in rank also comes with its responsibilities, so this also could result in some sort of side quest or mini story within the adventure or the entire campaign, or several mini stories perhaps. So you have a list of all of the different ranks and titles of the UEDF. You could be a civilian, a private, a corporal, a sergeant. You also, of course, have titles within the Centrale Forces. You could be a worker, a general, a supreme commander, a warlord. In this game, you can be anything that you want. Of course, it's going to take some effort, otherwise it wouldn't be worth it and it wouldn't be logical. Through your actions, through your feats, through your combat, and the way that you relate to others, you will be able to go up or down within the ranks and gain new titles. When it comes to fame, as you become more famous, you will be more recognizable and you will have access to larger venues outside of a particular circle or hierarchy. You could be a personality, a starlet, a star, a diva. It all depends. Now, when it comes to hero progression or character progression, you gain experience points by succeeding at different things. For example, you gain a number of experience points for each hour of gameplay. If you defeat a weak enemy or a stronger enemy, you get more experience points with stronger enemies, of course. You can also obtain more experience points by moving the story forward, completing minor story arcs or major story arcs, saving someone's life. You can even obtain experience if you sacrifice yourself for the benefit of others. So if you survive, you gain a lot of experience points, and these experience points will be used to level up your character. Once you obtain enough experience points and you go up a level, you obtain a number of build points that you can spend to unlock new things. Maybe you want to change your career, or you want a new skill, or maybe you want to gain a new element. You could also go up in rank, but of course it has to make sense with the story. You would need to earn that title or rank. You also have some optional build rules to handle leveling up as a partial progression, improving your character little by little rather than just all in one go after you level up. Or maybe you want to go up beyond the normal limits in play, that is high level play, so that you feel like a truly epic character. And you also have an optional rule to create a 0 level character if you want to start out as a rookie perhaps. This is a great way to do it. You have a section detailing stress, with fatigue and drama. Drama is obtained by interacting with player characters and non-player characters. Drama is usually always bad. It's basically an obstacle that you must deal with, because otherwise situations could arise when you least expect them and causing trouble for different objectives and goals that you want to reach. When it comes to fatigue, this results from fighting the enemy and watching your friends getting hurt or even killed. There is a slight contrast between drama and fatigue. Drama is somewhat difficult to obtain, but also difficult to get rid of. And fatigue is usually easy to accrue, but it's also easy to get rid of it.
Still, we must fight or face defeat. We must stand tall and not retreat. Our strength will find the might. There's no fight we can't fight. Together, all together, we can win.
Now let's talk a bit more about drama. You gain a point of drama from social interactions that cause you to become emotional or confused. So this is all about conflicts and issues that could arise through your interactions with perhaps a family member, a friend, an acquaintance. So this could result in several things. Maybe an unhealthy rivalry could develop between you and one of your fellow pilots. Maybe you have some sort of love triangle. Maybe someone is trying to blackmail you. Maybe there is a dark secret that you don't want people to find out about. Maybe there is a conflict with one of your superiors or a co-worker. So you need to take care of this as fast as possible, because otherwise there will be trouble when you least expect it. That is, some of the situations could result in negative and unforeseen developments outside or inside of battle. You track these conflicts in the stress tracker, So you have to keep in mind that you need to solve these things as quickly as possible by interacting with several people involved in the conflict, or just one of them. So maybe another pilot got mad at you because he was going to take care of something in the battlefield, but because the mission was in danger, you had to take care of some of those enemies that your wingman was trying to take care of. So that pilot feels that you are stealing his skills and his glory, and now you need to solve things with that pilot. Maybe you can have a discussion, or if that pilot is quite physically inclined, maybe it will come to blows. Or maybe there is another type of situation. Maybe because of your military career, you have been neglecting your family, perhaps your wife, or perhaps a friend or a girlfriend, and now you need to perhaps make it up to them, because otherwise the game master will find some way of introducing some conflicts and challenges during all sorts of situations. For example, in the case of your bitter rival, in the case of the pilot, maybe you are in the middle of a battle and you have to reach this objective, accomplish a particular part of a mission, and now this pilot got mad at you and his emotions get in the way, and he doesn't listen to you when you need to carry out a coordinated attack or assault, and that could get both of you into trouble. Maybe someone ends up killed, maybe the mission ends up in failure, or maybe you are outside of battle and you're trying to live your everyday life, and now your family or your friends, they do not pay attention to you, or maybe they are actively seeking to harm you, depending on the sort of grievances that were produced because of the way your military career got in the way. And this is just giving a small example of the developments. Maybe your character doesn't have anything to do with the military. You can also play as an entertainer. Maybe you're constantly going on tour and singing and dancing, and you're ignoring everyone else around you. And maybe there is someone in show business that is out to get you. So you need to find some way to solve this, either through peaceful methods or taking a more direct approach. But Robotech, the role-playing game, really wants you to take into account that you are not separated and that you're from the rest of the game world, and that your actions will have consequences. Sure, you could try to eliminate some troublesome people in the case of those that are acting against you, but you need to keep in mind if this will be carried out subtly, or if it will be better to befriend them so that they can actually help you. And one interesting thing is that during different tasks and checks, for example in battle or perhaps in a diplomatic situation or social interaction, you can actually gain drama in exchange for a heroic move. And we will talk more about heroic moves later on in this review. So for example, maybe you are in the middle of this space fight and you need to take care of an enemy or destroy some sort of vehicle from the enemy, acquire some sort of target, and you take this heroic action, but you get in the way of your fellow pilots, disrupting their tactics, perhaps getting them into danger, but it was a necessary risk to take. Or maybe in a social situation, you try to befriend or perhaps become an ally of someone during a party or a meeting, but you end up saying some things that other people wanted you to keep in secret, and now you are in conflict with those people that wanted you to keep your mouth shut. So you have different examples of how this backlash could result of your accumulated drama, developing unhealthy competition, being the target of sabotage, perhaps even blacklisted. And you also have an optional rule to have drama armor. The more drama that you accumulate, the more wounds you will be able to take. So this reflects that you are quite important for the story, because in anime and manga, usually those characters that have so many drama threats going on, they are important to the story because people want to know more about them, so they are kept alive as much as possible. Then we have information on fatigue. Like I mentioned before, in contrast with drama, fatigue is quite easy to accumulate, but easier to get rid of, unlike drama that perhaps you need to carry out a sort of side quest or side mission or side story to resolve those conflicts. And because of the system, because it's so smooth, it's very easy to make a transition from one scene to the other. You could have 2 or 3 characters solving their own drama, jumping from scene to scene in that soap opera type of transition that you would see in anime and manga. But when it comes to fatigue, because of perhaps the deaths of friends, sustained combat, serious injuries, feeling guilty about something that you shouldn't do inside or outside the battlefield, and this fatigue accumulates as stress, making you act quite erratically when you least expect it. You also have information on burnout. Everyone has a burnout value. Perhaps you have a burnout value of 5 or 6. So if you roll a number of dice greater than your burnout, it results in fatigue. So this is sort of your way of handling stress. It represents how strong you are when dealing with emotionally or psychologically charged situations, those situations that could take you off balance. Then we have information on mental break. When you accumulate too much stress, perhaps due to drama or fatigue, you will end up acting in unusual ways as dictated by the situation and imposed by the game master as long as it makes sense with the encounter or the action taken. So for example, maybe you suddenly start to look for revenge, or your character becomes quite melancholic, reckless, or too cautious. So all of this could arise during different situations, throwing a wrench on your plans. So when it comes to fatigue, you really need to get some rest and recover, and perhaps seek some help if things are too difficult for you. And in drama, you need to take care of those conflictive relationships or interactions with other characters. Otherwise, both drama and fatigue will accumulate as stress and result in this mental break, perhaps even a mental breakdown. And all of this creates so many role-playing opportunities. For example, in the case of fatigue, maybe one of your friends died in battle and now you have to attend the funeral. Maybe you are just so stressed out with your military career, or perhaps in some technical issues or matters and you just want to play around for a bit. Maybe you go out and have some fun in the city. All of these are perfect opportunities for the entire group to develop their characters' personalities as they start to have some fun, as they rest and recover, interact with other non-player characters. Perhaps things could develop in strong relationships not only between the group members but also with some non-player characters. Maybe some friendships or romances are formed. After this section we have a list of iconic characters. Pretty much every important character, at least that's what I think, of the Robotech saga, at least in this period of the saga, appears here. So you have all of those important characters, such as Azonia, the highest ranking female Sentready in Dulce's fleet. You also have Ben Dixon. I'm going to avoid spoilers just in case you haven't seen Robotech and you want to experience the story through the campaign included in this rulebook that I really want to tell you about that campaign later on. So all of you that already know the story know the emotional impact of Ben Dixon, but also how he developed little by little from being a terrible pilot, becoming a bit better. Although there are some fans of Robotech that consider Ben to be a bit of a nuisance at times. Then we have General Britai, of course, one of the oldest and best and brightest minds created by the Robotech masters. Then we have Claudia Grant, one of the best examples in expressing the drama in a relationship in Robotech. You also have Dolza, Supreme Commander. Dolza has been Supreme Commander of the Sentready for centuries. His primary mission, as ordered by the Robotech Masters, was to find and retrieve Sor's missing battle fortress. So many of you identified this as the main villain, at least for a long time. We also have Dr. Emil Lang, perhaps the most important figure in reverse engineering the technology contained in the superdimensional fortress, and perhaps in understanding protoculture from a technical standpoint. And there are so many others, such as Exedor, who is not exactly the most physically fit Sentready warrior, but quite intelligent. You also have information on Grell and Gerao, Chiron's most trusted people. And of course we have information on Henry Global, the captain of the super-dimensional fortress. Pretty much everyone's lives depend on his judgment, on his strategies and tactics. And then there's Jack Archer. I'm really glad that they included him in this rulebook. If I'm not mistaken, he only appeared in the PlayStation 2 Robotech game. He's probably my favorite character in the entire series. He's a very skilled pilot, probably around Roy Focker's skill in combat or above him, perhaps, probably above him. And his entire participation in the PlayStation 2 is quite dramatic. Without giving too many spoilers, there is quite a bit of uncertainty near the end of the story. But I really liked his attitude and his Jack the Giant Killer, the way he talks and he fights the enemies. So really an awesome character overall. Then we have Chiron's information. Chiron, also known as the Backstabber, one of the most unhinged and unpredictable commanders in the Centredi fleet. And we also have information on Lisa Hayes. Many of you know in Robotech, I'm kinda... Well, I'm going to give some small spoilers for those that still want to watch the series or play the scenario through this role-playing game. In my opinion, she's one of the most important characters and representative character in when it comes to love triangles in anime and manga. But I'm going to avoid further spoilers because many people could actually be unaware of how things are going to develop and they could find out about the story while playing the campaign. But Lisa Hayes, she's a very capable officer. At first she seems so somewhat cold and professional, but you can see that she has a very passionate heart, and this adds a lot of spice and drama to the story. We also have Lin Kyle, that is Min May's cousin. A lot of people actually hate this character. There are many flaws to this man, but you could say as a story device, he brings forth the truth between the interactions between Rick Hunter and Lin Min May. And of course, we have information on Max Sterling, probably the best pilot or one of the best pilots in the entire Robotech saga, and probably one of the earliest examples of unexpected and clashing romances in anime. Then we have Mireya Parina, the ace pilot of the Centredi forces, and she's perhaps Max Sterling's greatest rival, not only in terms of skill, but because she becomes quite obsessed in defeating him. So there will be some exciting conflicts between them in several ways. And of course, we're going to have information on Rick Hunter, the main character of Robotech. He's everywhere. In every major conflict in the series, Rick Hunter is there, inside or outside of the battlefield. He's interacting with all the characters. He's sometimes a protector, sometimes a friend. He's always there to rescue and sometimes to be rescued in the beginnings of the series. And from the very first episode, you can see this unpredictable romance suddenly coming alive between Rick and Lin Min May. So it's going to be quite a challenge for both of them to move on with their respective careers. Him being a pilot and Min May being a diva. But because those styles clash so much and because of immaturity on the part of several people involved in this romance, like I was telling you, it's quite unpredictable and conflicting. This is one of the driving forces of the Robotech saga, and you could even say that it determines the fate of one of the major battles in the series. And we have information on Roy Fokker. Now, Roy was pretty much a brother figure and even a mentor to Rick Hunter. He is one of the most important figures in the early battles of the series, and it is because he's always at the front line of battle that he is the one at most risk. So Roy Fokker is one of the favorite characters of the fans because of his impact, of his attitude, confident and always ready for battle, and being wise in the ways of love and war. And then there's Lin Min May, perhaps the most iconic Robotech character. She is a flawed character, quite immature at times. Sometimes she also looks to be a bit airheaded. And when it comes to Rick Hunter and Lin Min May, you could say other characters later on in the saga were modeled or were sort of followers of these archetypes. You always had this idol, this singer inspiring everyone, and this pilot trying to find his way in the thick of battle while at the same time balancing his personal life. Lin Min May proves that the power of music, of love, of passion is vital in winning a war. She is a master at getting people's spirits up, but when it comes to her conflictive romance with Rick Hunter, you only wish that that inspiration, that pureness of heart could be applied to the relationship between those two characters. And lastly, we have information on bridge officers Sammy Porter, Vanessa Leeds, and Kim Young on the SDF side. And when it comes to the Centredi, we have information on Rico, Konda, and Bron. Now, both of these trios of characters, they're sometimes there to provide comedy relief, but they still have their important roles in forming a bridge between Centredi culture and human culture. Now, the cool thing of all of this information of the characters, that is both the biography and the stats, because they give you everything. If you want to know the attributes, the skills, the talents, the equipment, the proficiencies for any of these characters, it's all here. You can play as these characters or have them as non-player characters, as allies or as enemies. You can play the entire Robotech Saga as any one of these characters with this information. Now, let's talk about skills and talents and the challenges that you'll take on. There are different challenge types. They represent obstacles that you must overcome during play. So the Game Master is the final arbiter, but the player can also give some reasons as to how he's going to use his skills, his talents, anything related to his character when it comes to overcoming different challenges and obstacles. Some challenges could be combative challenges. They are represented by opposing forces. You are trying to be more successful than your opponent. It could be combat, it could be playing some sort of board game. Then we have static challenges. They are presented in situations in which you must succeed at a task and there's no other being trying to oppose you. You have basic challenges that could be automatic successes. You won't need to roll at all. So if you gain enough successes to meet or exceed the challenge presented, you are successful at that challenge, of course, but depending on the number of successes or how you fail at that, there could be some variations. Maybe you obtain a partial success. You meet the result somewhat, but there could be some sort of penalty or unforeseen development. Maybe you fail at the check and you get a hard failure, so you cannot accomplish that task. Or maybe there is a soft failure. You can actually make more attempts to succeed at that particular challenge, but it could be risky. Maybe there is some sort of circumstance or some sort of way in which the story unfolds. If you fail at the challenge, it kind of fails forward, or maybe even if you succeed, you will have to pay the price in some way. Although there is another way of better handling that, as we will see later on. You also have sticky challenges. They occur when something bad is associated with attempting the challenge, and typically the challenge is passed, but the degree of success in which you complete the task also kind of mitigates the negative consequences. So a sticky challenge depends on getting the best result as possible, and you may actually eliminate the consequences completely. There could also be mixed successes, getting a bit of success with failure. And as you can see, they get quite specific with this, because in the complex drama of Robotech, oftentimes the characters don't have things going as they want them to go, but at the same time, they triumph. So it's for those deep and multi-layered moments that somewhat mimic something that you would see in real life. You also have information on time frames, because maybe these challenges, these tasks could happen in an instant, in moments, in seconds, in hours, perhaps weeks or months. And after that, we have information on special challenge options. This is where it gets really interesting. You can actually make a sacrifice so that you have a better chance at succeeding at a task. For example, maybe you are piloting your Veritech and you need to move faster than usually possible. You can do that, but maybe your vehicle's engine will suffer for it. And if you take too long in some checks, there could be a penalty. And in other cases, maybe the successes of a past check actually work in your favor when you attempt some other thing. There's also heroic successes. This is an optional rule. When a challenge is attempted, if the success achieved is sufficiently great, something amazing will happen. So this brings out additional bonuses or a sort of positive chain of events resulting from that single task. Then we have information on challenge difficulties. It could be easy, moderate, hard, very hard, or astonishing. So with each difficulty, you will need more successes. When it comes to heroic moves that I mentioned briefly a few moments ago, this is about your hero's luck, experience, his style, his moxie. You are able to pull through when others fall back. To do this, you normally need to spend a heroic move point. But there are two ways in which you can activate this heroic move. You just use your move, that is, you spend your point, and you tell the game master how you're going to do that, it must be related to the element of your hero. So for example, if your hero is some sort of mechanic, maybe you need to repair something in a hurry, so you spend your move point and you manage to accomplish the impossible in so little time. But this wouldn't be possible for a character in another profession. Maybe your character is more focused on performance and entertainment, and so you wouldn't be able to carry out those impossible tasks. But maybe when it comes to singing, to dancing, to inspiring, perhaps acting, you will be able to pull it off in front of a low morale audience, or perhaps in front of people who do not speak your language. The other way of activating these heroic moves is by creating drama. You voluntarily gain or accept drama to use this heroic move without spending a point. For example, what if you're in the middle of a very intense gunfight and you take on the most difficult, the most important enemy, while the rest of the squad members are having a difficult time? So you manage to win the combat, but they resent that you did not support them or offer some cover fire. They think that maybe you did it to steal the glory, so now you have created drama with those other characters. And heroic moves can be used in a variety of ways. Maybe you can create some sort of area of effect, applying your successes to allies or enemies. Maybe you may move yourself or something else, an object, or perhaps an enemy or an ally. Maybe you can apply a modifier to a specific target. You could accomplish something faster, like I mentioned before. There are many different ways depending on the situation, so heroic moves are extremely powerful. They are basically ways of overcoming any obstacle, but because of that, they cannot be used frequently because you need to use heroic move points. And things can get quite situational because the heroic move needs to make sense with the element of your character, and the type of situation must be related to the area of expertise of that character. And it is important to note that the only way to recover heroic move points is by completing a story arc, accomplishing something quite remarkable, so you cannot be doing this all the time. You even have an optional rule of hapless heroes. This is somewhat more tongue-in-cheek, perhaps a bit more pulpy, and this is when your character can use heroic moves in any sort of situation. So you have a character that specializes in piloting. Suddenly you discover that your character has a special talent when it comes to acting or playing an instrument. Or maybe your character is a doctor, and suddenly you realize that you are quite stealthy when performing some sort of spy work. So this is up to you if you want to apply this optional rule. Personally, I do not like it too much. I think it adds too much power to a character. Perhaps it would be useful in a campaign with just an adventure or a campaign with just two characters, because two characters have less skills, they have less range when it comes to applying their different talents and proficiencies. So this way you could balance things a bit more so that those characters do not feel like the adventure or the campaign is too difficult. And it would make sense because if there are only two characters taking on a very important mission, maybe those characters are actually very talented, extremely competent. Then we have more information on skills. They represent the expertise that your character exhibits in everything from maneuvering your Veritech to lying and perhaps sneaking about to performing. So you have an explanation on the benefits, that is a word or a short term that indicates what the skill does or provides to you. And the cost, that is a limitation or contingency that must be met to use the skill effectively. And then you have information on one of the best aspects of the skills, which are equipment suits. These are basically gear items that you can use to accomplish different things. Instead of having a whole selection or list of all of the different tools that you need when fighting or when performing some sort of research and development, you have these equipment suits that are quite abstract but very easy to use in a very streamlined way. Now, the way these skills are used is by creating actions. Each turn, you can use a total of the following to create actions. You could use 2 skills to create 2 actions. You could use 1 equipment suit during each turn, but you could apply your skills by using heroic moves, talents, and other sources in other ways, perhaps even in additional ways. So when it comes to actions, you could be assisting someone, you could be observing someone or something, you could be attacking or defending, or redirecting something, some move, the opponent's position, an attack, all sorts of things. Actions are quite versatile. When you want to use them, you describe how you intend to use the skills to perform an action, and you roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to a total value of your skills, and you count your successes. Because you are able to use 2 skills and 1 equipment suit, you're going to be rolling lots of dice. And there could be some modifiers in your roll. You could have some disadvantages or hindrances, or maybe an advantage, or you have an edge over the situation. And because of the elements that compose your player characters, it's all about being creative in a situation, so that you always have the advantage, or that you mitigate the hindrances and disadvantages if your character is not acting in the best of circumstances. But in the other way around, you can also be more than effective when carrying out a task, as long as you work within your element, within your set of skills. And you have a huge selection of skills, so that you can create and customize the type of character you want to play as in Robotech. Perhaps you specialize in ambush tactics, perhaps you are really good at blending in, maybe you are an expert at fighting in close quarters, maybe you are an escape artist, maybe you have a grand presence, maybe you can fix almost anything, maybe you have precise targeting, you're an expert at psychoanalysis. They have pretty much anything covered. And if you do not have a particular skill that applies to your character, you could use any of these skills as examples. And you can easily associate any of these skills with the element of your character. And each skill is treated with an exquisite level of detail. So for example, Adept Negotiator. You know how to use leverage and avoid topics of weakness to gain the upper hand. So as a benefit, you could reach a compromise and get something you want, but as a cost, maybe you want to give something as well. You could use this in physical confrontations, perhaps leaving yourself open to take damage in order to land the killing blow. In social situations, maybe you acquire some rare parts to build more mecha, but you need to give up some other parts as well. And when it comes to technical situations, maybe you fix a system, but you do not have the proper tools, so maybe you short out one aspect of the system, or maybe you fix that system just for a few moments so that it accomplishes a task and then it breaks down. And this same detailed treatment is given to all of the other skills, such as Angelic Grace, contacts everywhere, that is, you have contacts in many different groups and settings. So this is perfect for those that have just started to play role-playing games. They will have no doubts, no questions as to how to use a particular skill. And for those of us that have been playing for a long time, you will surely appreciate the level of structure and detail with each of the skills. Now, when it comes to talents, they could be considered tricks or capabilities that could get you out of a tight spot. Talents are very different from skills because talents usually modify the environment around you. They could give you some sort of benefit beyond a simple modifier. Perhaps they allow you to recover one of your lost resources. Perhaps the talents allow you to work with something in the environment, or even something related to the character's personality and how the character approaches the world. So we have some pretty straightforward things, such as leadership. This is a category of the talents. And you have things such as munitions strike. So you could call a ground bombardment, or an aerospace barrage, a reflex strike. You also have things such as coffee break. Basically, you take a break and you relax and you recover from any fatigue or exhaustion. You also have other things such as mad thinker. You're able to see things that others cannot perceive. Or maybe you can call a supply drop, getting kits, ammunition, anything that is needed. Now on the piloting category, you have things such as all the missiles. This is quite thematic, very much a staple of Robotech. Remember those scenes where the Vertec is flying around and shooting those all sorts of missiles, and they leave these strings of smoke behind them? So once per encounter, you can double the skill dice of a missile equipment suite, but it uses a lot of ammo. You have other things such as fly anything. You have the expertise to pilot any type of advanced or flying craft. And you have friends in high places. You have a personal friend who outranks you, but you can gain that friend's equipment, support, help, anything that is needed. I think this is a good excuse to perhaps add some drama if you are planning to use drama intentionally to get some benefits. You also have the tactical category. You have things such as infiltrator. So you gain an edge to rolls when sneaking and your presence has not been detected or is not expected. You also have martial artist, pretty self-explanatory. You have track star, you are very fast when moving on ground. You also have other things such as weapon expert. You have an innate understanding of how light weapons operate and can operate any light weapon with proficiency. So as you can see, some of these talents add more to the over the top, to the pulpiness of Robotech, but I think they still remain quite balanced, even though Robotech could be considered a very exaggerated in some ways sci-fi anime. It's still quite moderate when compared to perhaps Gundam, where they have these psychic powers due to their new type conditions, and many other science fantasy type of settings. You also have the technical category, with things such as always a handy tool. Even without a toolkit, you always seem to have a useful tool on you. You also have field medic, which allows you to treat wounds with few materials. As you can see, when you combine talents with things such as heroic actions, you can take your character to the next level in terms of competence or expertise, but with those limits consider that you can only use one heroic action during a particular moment, with some limits like when you can use heroic action only after you regain your heroic action point and such. You also have some very handy things such as quick diagnostics. You are able to identify a mechanical or electrical problem by listening to it or observing minor changes in its behavior. And there are many more talents in each category. This is just a small sample. After that, we have information on engagements and encounters, how your talents and heroic moves could relate to perhaps a specific span of time. It could be an interpersonal conflict, how you can use your abilities, how you can interact with the world and other non-player characters. Then we have the gear and kits section. Now, usually you would think of kits and gear as something that you carry with you. And yes, of course, you have information on all sorts of objects and tools that you can even conceal carry, the amount of items you can carry with you, anything related to requisition, owning gear. But when it comes to equipment in general, you can also operate anything in your environment. So you will be moving perhaps inside the superdimensional fortress, and if you need to operate a weapon system or some sort of shields array, you need to operate the different machines. And because your characters are considerably skilled, you will always have something to do, even when you're not acting as a pilot. So you have information here on all of the kits, communications kits, demolition kits, things related to infiltration and science and engineering. You also have optional systems to represent wealth, because although things are handled in an abstract way, with this wealth optional rule, you can still define what type of income you receive. Otherwise, you are relying on your rank to obtain all sorts of gear and vehicles. And there is an exquisitely detailed section on how you can use the world around you, that is, those resources that are tied to a particular room, an area, or a zone. So for example, maybe you want to use the battle comms. It tells you how many times you can use them and how skilled you need to be. You also have information on how you can use your station. Maybe you are a commander and you want to emit a powerful battle cry. You also have information on how to activate security protocols, technical routing. When it comes to uses, you can activate a specific system, like for example the scan matrix. In the case of the scan matrix, you can actually use it twice. Now this doesn't mean that you can only use, for example, your communications device once and that's it. It means that you do a special action to coordinate a particular maneuver within the grander scheme of battle, or perhaps just switching on a system. So when you activate, for example, the security protocols, you just need to activate them once. You don't need to activate them every time the enemy is attacking. Once they are switched on, they remain in function, unless something bad happens, of course. In the case of other systems and equipment suites, you can actually burn them or damage them if you keep using them all the time. So there is a limit. You must be mindful, pay attention to the type of system that you can use and how many times you can use it and how skilled you need to be. But this is not limited to combat. You also have information how to use equipment suites within the entertainment venues. Maybe you are using an amphitheater, maybe you're using the radio, so you can carry out some spectacular performances. Maybe you are a singer or a musician, or maybe your character is a radio personality and you inform people at the same time that you are entertaining them. You also have terrain tactics with information how you can propel yourself by using some sort of vertical hard surface, perhaps in an anti-gravity environment, or with regular gravity to perform some acrobatics while fighting. You could also use the gravity well of a planet to slingshot yourself in a particular direction, and you have all sorts of information on how you can use other environment elements or ideas. Maybe you want to use the memory of a dead comrade to inspire you. Maybe you will use some sort of furniture or debris as cover. You could even work that with other particulars of battle, like for example, if an enemy is injured, perhaps your superior position allows you to target that injury more effectively. So this allows you to work with your skills, with your talents, and perform all sorts of heroic moves as needed. And then you have a very extensive, highly detailed section with all the information concerning vehicles and weapon systems. So you have information on the basics of vessels, such as what is a mecha, what is a naval vessel, the weapon and technology used, the types of weapon systems, such as particle cannons, defensive cannons, and missiles. You also have information on general naval locations such as bridges, hangars, reactors. You also have loadouts specific to mecha, such as hardware points, environmental protection, basic sensors. You also have all the information concerning the Super Dimensional Fortress 1. And I'm sure that all of the Robotech fans are going to feel quite excited. They will have all of the data and details concerning the interior of the Super Dimensional Fortress, all of the locations, Macross City, the reflex furnace, any area related to production and science, all of the technical information, the armor of the Super Dimensional Fortress, the engines, the weapons such as the rail cannons, the omnidirectional barrier system, pinpoint barrier system. You can engage into battle mode when the Super Dimensional Fortress becomes in this huge city-size mecha. It's so amazing. And you can fire the reflex cannon. So if you want to carry out those huge devastating attacks where you take out entire squads of enemies, entire armies, you can do that with the Super Dimensional Fortress. And this is a team effort, so everyone in the party or the group of characters is going to participate in activating this powerful attack. You also have information on naval vessels, such as the armor class carriers, the Oberth class destroyers, and this is from the UEDF, the human side of things. Later on you also have information on Centredi equipment and vehicles. So back to the human side, we have all sorts of equipment suites to perform torpedo launches, torpedo runs, fire in long bursts, shoot a barrage of mini missiles, and use any sort of missile as needed by the situation in combat. Anything related to armor, to switching from one mode to the other. There's so much information here that it's going to be quite easy for you to come up with your original vehicles and weapon systems. But the value here is magnificent. You have any mecha, any vehicle. If my memory doesn't fail me, every vehicle that appears in this period of Robotech. And that includes other types of tools and gear and weapons, such as small arms, all sorts of rifles, missile launchers, all sorts of suits, protective suits, space suits. You even have a section where they handle companions as gear, because they add to your skills. So you have an assistant, a bodyguard, a co-pilot. All of them, or each one of them rather, will improve your different roles in specific tasks. Then we have the Centredi section, detailing the vessels, the base ships, the pods, the power armor. I forgot to mention that you have information on the way of life of both the humans and the Centredi, so this is great for a newcomer to the series. And because the Centredi are exclusively bred for war, you can see this reflected in all of their gear and their vehicles. So you have information on their dropships, their scout ships, their assault carriers, their gunships, their flagships as well. They always have that sort of organic look to them. There's also data on battle pods, on the different types, the fighter types, the tactical types. You also have information on the vehicles that officers would use. You also have information on deep space booster upgrades, Centredi power armor as well. Also the female variant. You also have information on utility craft, on their gear and weapons as well, such as the power blade, the Tsengar particle assault rifle, the Nirhal Gorol missile launcher, You also have information on different suits of armor, such as flight suits, infantry armor, battle armor. There's also information on mecha upgrades, such as assault cannons, officer pod deep space boosters. There are also specific details on how Centredi are affected by stress and fame. And because the Centredi are too focused on the warrior lifestyle, the way that they gain stress and fatigue is quite different when compared to humans. For example, conflicts cause very little stress and fatigue to a Centredi. But when it comes to exposure to culture, beautiful things, aesthetics and such, this gets the Centredi quite conflicted. So this is when the Centredi starts to feel quite stressed and fatigued when confronted with these concepts that are quite far away from violence and carnage. Centredi also get more into drama when it comes to rivalry. They are constantly trying to be better than their peers and their enemies. And when it comes to shock and mental break, they suffer this when exposed to all sorts of things related to a peaceful way of life, to art and entertainment. They feel this alluring sensation. They feel drawn to this art, to this culture, and this causes quite the conflict in their warrior mindset. You also have specifics on Centredi fame, wealth, titles, and rank. Usually, a Centredi could go up the ranks as a great warrior, going from Scourge to Champion to Savior and Executioner. Or he could be an orator, being a speaker, a librarian, a sage, or a guardian. Next, we have a section detailing conflicts. This is all about resolving actions, combat. So, conflict rounds are divided in 4 steps. First, there is the conflict description. The Game Master describes the obvious or apparent situation. Then you have the communication phase. Here the players have a brief period to plan how they will use their actions to engage the conflicts. Then you have the getting the drop step. Any character who gets the drop can take the action first. This is sort of like a surprise step. Then we have the take action step. Each player has a total of 2 actions. He could use those actions to support someone, to carry out some sort of ops, like attacking or defending. And there's also the cinematic way of interacting with the situation, trying to inhibit others or use something in the environment. The other step is being slowed. Any character who has been inhibited will take their actions last. Now, some of these steps are pretty self-explanatory, but let's go a bit deeper into the take action step. Like I mentioned, each round you have a total of 2 actions, and 1 equipment suit that can be used to engage the conflict. Maybe you want to do a support action. You could observe, obscure, or assist. Observe is when you are able to gain information about a target or an area, because you will be fighting some very intense space battles, and even if you're not in space, because battles can get quite exciting and chaotic, you need to be able to discover hidden units, find a specific enemy, identify weak points, identify the different types of units. So this is also an action, using perhaps some sort of system or piece of technology to have an easier time when doing so. In contrast, we have the obscure action. Maybe you want to hide an object, or yourself, or an ally. Then we have the assist action. You could perform a general assist, supporting your allies by providing covering fire. Or maybe you want to do something very specific, assist them in some sort of action or task. This is the most versatile way of helping someone in combat. Now, when it comes to the ops way of using your actions, you have attack. This is pretty self-explanatory. You use some sort of weapon to cause damage, and your target's armor soaks the damage. So the more successes that you have, the better chance you have to inflict damage. Damage is applied to the target or targets in an area immediately after rolling. You also have defend, which allows you to turn your successes into armor. So maybe during one particular round you want to focus completely on defending yourself. These successes are applied based on the approach you intend. If you are getting shot by multiple enemies, you may not be able to use your successes to defend against all attacks. But regardless, each success reduces damage inflicted from a specific source. You also have the redirect option. This is a special type of action, and you can use it to do several things. You could make a special non-damaging attack. Perhaps you want to trip your opponent or disarm your opponent. You could also use it to reposition an enemy or yourself. Maybe you want to jump up a certain platform, or maybe during a heated space battle you want to get your enemy stuck in some sort of field of debris so that that enemy is hindered, he has a difficult time aiming. Now when it comes to the cinematic phase, you could interact with your environment, like if you want to hack a terminal or you want to go through a very difficult place. Maybe you are flying in fighter mode and you need to fly through this field of asteroids or chunks of some sort of space vehicle. You need to carry out this action to move through it successfully without damaging yourself. Or maybe you want to inhibit someone. You want to create obstacles. Instead of, for example, redirecting your enemy, getting that enemy into the field of debris, maybe you want to push something against that enemy. Maybe it's not even in space. Maybe there is a battle going on in a sort of junkyard and you decide to push this pile of spare parts over an enemy. You could do this through the inhibit action. Or maybe you are fighting in some sort of factory and you manage to produce some sort of steam or smoke by messing around with the machines so that the enemy does not know where you are. Now, in actions, over the course of your turn, you may use up to a total of 2 skills as the basis for your actions, and you may also include 1 equipment suite. Now you could carry out your actions all at once or divide them in phases. So maybe you want to act before your enemy and you wish to wait, and then you carry out your remaining action. Despite having a solid structure when it comes to battle, it's also quite freeform depending on the many things that could happen in battle. And if some people find it a bit too complicated, there are optional rules to simplify things. For example, the Game Master could choose that an equipment suite must be associated with an action. So in this case you would have a total of 2 actions including the equipment suite instead of 3. And in this case some could be wondering what's the exact difference between equipment suites and skills. And the difference is that you could use skills for separate actions, but an equipment suite could be used to support one of those skill-based actions, or you could use the equipment suite for a third action if it applies. So maybe you want to jump and then you want to shoot, but you also want to activate some sort of terminal. You could use your equipment suite to do that, to activate that terminal after jumping and after shooting, or in any order that you wish. Now when it comes to burnout, it means that you are pushing your limits and taking fatigue as a result. This happens when you roll enough skill dice to exceed your burnout limit. This is more likely to happen when you combine 2 of your actions in a single phase for a single type of task instead of splitting them up. For example, maybe you choose to take both actions in the ops phase to attack and defend. So you choose 2 skills that combine for a total of 6 dice, but your burnout is 5. And this becomes a very tactical part of battle. Sometimes you need to perform an action and you need to roll as many dice as possible, so you do not care if you roll above your burnout. And remember, this does not depend on successes. If you have a burnout of 5 and you decide to roll 6 dice, you're going to get 1 fatigue. If you decide to roll 7 dice, you're going to get 2 fatigue. But in other ways, you could also be a bit more cautious or careful. Maybe you have a pool of 8 dice and your burnout is 6. You could drop 2 of those dice so that you do not roll above your burnout, and that way you won't get fatigue. There are many other things that could affect actions, like for example some talents provide you with bonus actions, and you could also get a conflict bonus. If the Game Master approves that your element applies to the situation, you could get an edge or an advantage during that particular combat situation. And in this part of the rulebook, you also have a list of the many different ways in which you can use heroic moves. By creating area effects, maybe you want to create a line, cone, or blast effect using some sort of weapon. You could also make a cold shot. You could also use your success for all incoming damage as a sort of universal defense. You could carry out a surprise knockout, try to pin the enemy, or you could trick the enemy into shooting their own friends or allies. And combat at its core is very simple. You have your pool of dice, you roll dice trying to get as many successes as possible. Each success inflicts 1 point of damage, but this is mitigated by the enemy's armor. Added to that, the enemy could have spent one of his actions to avoid or mitigate the damage further. Rolling a pool of dice and each success mitigates a point of damage. You also have information on how area effects happen using some sort of weapon or a sensor. So you have this radius, some sort of line or cone or blast template of sorts, and depending on the successes that you achieve, you apply all of those successes to each target in an area. Of course, there is an optional rule. It could be a partial effect. If the target is completely covered by the effect, it takes damage as normal. However, if the target is just touched by the effect, not completely enveloped, then it's treated as if that target has an extra point of armor against it. Now, one very cool and effective way of handling damage is through damage categories of light damage, mecha damage, and naval damage. Light damage is basically any sort of attack carried out from small arms, or perhaps a sort of weapon that a normal human could carry with him, and 10 points of light damage will equal 1 mecha damage. Mecha damage is damage that could be suffered by a mecha, by one of those humanoid vehicles. When it comes to mecha, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually damage that vehicle using small arms. It's going to be impossible in most cases. You'll need some very advanced piece of gear or weaponry to damage a mecha. And if the mecha attacks, for example, a human that is not mounted on a vehicle or behind some sort of protection, a single point of mecha damage is going to count as 10 light damage. And a mecha could only damage a spaceship if he inflicts 10 mecha damage on that structure. A spaceship using its weapon systems can inflict 10 points of damage in a mecha with a single point of naval damage. So I think you can imagine what would happen if a spaceship were to attack a human. It would be overkill. Remember, a single point of naval damage equals 10 mecha damage, and 1 mecha damage equals 10 light damage. So that human will be pulverized, and humans have no way of harming a spaceship with small arms. If you are trying to destroy a spaceship with your automatic rifle, tough luck, it's not going to happen. You also have specific information on the different structures, like for example when it comes to mecha framework, what happens when a specific section is destroyed, maybe the armor is damaged, some piece of hardware, the structure itself. You also have more details on mecha systems, and as you can imagine, any of these targets could spell the defeat of the mecha, perhaps indirectly. For example, engines propel the mecha, but as the engines become more damaged, the mecha's maximum speed is reduced to 25% per level of damage. So as the engines get damaged, the mecha will become more and more slow, more difficult for that mecha to get behind cover, for example, and in consequence, that mecha would be a sitting duck. The sensors could also be damaged, the thrusters. So the key to winning any battle will be to applying your attacks to target these specific areas, because if you're constantly trying to apply direct damage to your enemy, it's not always possible. It's better to perhaps soften that enemy up, destroy his advantages, his abilities, damage his weapon systems, so that he is not effective in combat because of the damage that he has suffered. So it's going to be vital to target these different targets in a structure when it comes to the enemy vehicle or perhaps in a base, because sometimes a direct approach of just applying raw damage is not going to work. Sometimes you need to neutralize some sort of system that creates an energy field, or maybe the enemy is just too fast and you need to slow it down. Maybe you need to take care of a weapon system because you simply cannot go toe to toe with your enemy. This is all part of the tactics in Robotech. Now, when it comes to a human fighting a sentry that is outside of a vehicle, it's going to be very hard for the human to defeat that sentry, but it's still possible if you are using the right weapons. A human can take 3 light wounds, and then that human becomes incapacitated or dies. And the sentry can actually take 15 light wounds. As you take damage, you will take penalties to your skill rolls, but it's quite obvious that the sentry have the advantage when it comes to resisting or taking punishment. It's going to be impossible for a human to take on a sentry in hand-to-hand combat, but even if that human is equipped with a powerful firearm, he still needs to be very careful. Now, when it comes to recovery, superficial wounds could recover each day with first aid and several days with natural healing, but critical wounds, that is, when you are almost at the verge of death, In the case of humans, you only have 1 wound left, or Centredi only have 5 wounds left, you would need a week with first aid treatment to recover one of those wounds, and several weeks without treatment. And when a character becomes incapacitated, the only way for you to come out of that state is by going to a hospital or a clinic, or some sort of proper specialized treatment at the very least. Now, in this regard, the difference between non-player characters and player characters is that non-player characters usually die when they lose their last wound, but player characters only die when they take a wound beyond their critical wound. That is, a human that usually has 3 light wounds, although there are some talents that could give you more wounds. You would normally die when you take 3 light wounds, but because that player character is the hero of the story, you would need to take 4 wounds before dying. If you only take 3, you're just incapacitated. And there's all sorts of information when it comes to combat approaches. Every detail concerning different structures to be used as cover, the points of armor that they provide. You also have information on melee attacks and ramming your vehicle against your enemy's vehicle, how to make called shots, concentrated fire, how to use missiles, and variable transformations from fighter to guardian to Battloid. Then we have details on ranges and speed, on how different vehicles compare with each other. Some vehicles are just going to be too slow to be able to catch up with other vehicles or outmaneuver them. Everything is handled in a very hard sci-fi way. You even have some optional rules, like for example the optional rule of accelerating and decelerating. So when a vehicle moves after being stopped, it only moves at half rate. You have more information on ranges, space combat, ground combat, how to use these ranges not only to cover distances but also to make ranged attacks. You also have information on commanding subordinates. So you have details on how to work with your bodyguards, your assistants, like for example the bodyguard will give you a bonus in a defense action, and the assistant is going to give you a bonus whenever you interact with something or someone. More than anything, in a utility-based sort of action, you also have information on how to act with your squad members. For example, with a non-player character that has a capability that your player character does not have, you can actually take advantage of that ability, according to the circumstances, of course. Now let's talk a bit more about lethality. There is an optional rule to make the game quite gritty, but I think this is a bit away from the heroic actions that you would see in Robotech, the anime series. But if you want to play like supporting characters or secondary characters, or you just want to make the universe a bit more dangerous, you could add this high lethality mode that basically means that you get killed immediately when you lose your last wound. But don't think that this is going to be quite unforgiving. So for example, even if you add this high lethality mode optional rule, there is still a chance that you can actually survive. You roll a 6-sided die and you check out a table that could result in your character just incapacitated and he just needs to recover normally. But maybe you are actually mortally wounded and you will die in minutes if not stabilized. Or maybe you lose a limb, or maybe you die instantly. So if you wanted to have that certain scene that I don't want to spoil for those that have not seen the anime series, where one of the major characters dies when you think that he was actually okay, this is a great way to represent that. And this high lethality mode affects other things. So for example, any damage taken to a system doesn't just damage it, it completely destroys it. Stress is also affected by this. You are practically incapable of handling the pressures of combat, so you take a disadvantage to all actions when you are under the effects of stress. And you could also play as a squad. You could create several player characters and just attack en masse, have one of those huge battles, and swap the different characters as they either get incapacitated or killed. I think this is a great way of handling one-shot type of scenarios. And I think it would be a really cool idea if you want to have several rookies and handle this as a sort of funnel. So maybe the survivors become player characters that are not under this high lethality mode optional rule. There's also information on the different types of conflicts. Maybe you are facing swarms. They are made up of many individual but small units. Maybe you are facing a boss, a villain who is too powerful to be part of a swarm. Maybe it's a social confrontation, or maybe it's something environmental. Now when it comes to swarms, they basically represent an obstacle. You have information on their actions, their combined force, But because you're going to be fighting several of these low-skill pilots, usually in low-powered vessels, it is handled as an obstacle or as a single enemy, if you will. So for example, if you attack the swarm, you apply your successes to a swarm as if it were a single entity. But the swarm can also attack several characters at the same time. And you have the stats for different lieutenants and villains, naval vessels, so you have larger and more dangerous encounters. So this is a great way of, if you want to represent cannon fodder, you use swarms. But if you want something a bit more difficult and quite cinematic, you should use this boss type of characters. When it comes to social combat, it's actually quite similar to military combat. It's mostly based on roleplay, and the actors participating, you could lose during a social engagement, and you may end up with new drama or fatigue, or gaining new stress. This could obviously affect your reputation, your title or rank, or perhaps even in battle. Who knows how much influence one of your social enemies has on the development of a battle. Maybe he knows someone that puts you in a very dangerous spot during a fight, or maybe you needed some sort of equipment or resource, and the one who is handling that is actually in league or an ally of your social enemy. When it comes to environmental conflicts, it's all about those hazards such as fires, floods, disease, suffocation, hacking, maybe there's a saboteur. So you'll have to use all of your skills and talents and work within your element to overcome these environmental obstacles. You have all of the details concerning the damage caused to a structure, perhaps related to an explosive that was set up. You also have information on morale, how you could be affected, and you even have details on how to identify conflicts. Maybe they are not immediately apparent, so here's the information to verify them using some sort of gear or equipment suit, or just your skills, and what happens when you report that conflict, when a battle happens, or how a social engagement could unfold. Some conflicts could actually extend across different plot events or several scenarios. There's also information on how to handle different conflicts, how to design them, and how to identify when a conflict happens on a personal type of level or on a mass scale. Now, this could be a bit complex for some players, but there are actually optional rules later on that could actually turn the Robotech role-playing game into a very streamlined storytelling type of experience. Then we have a section giving more details and tips concerning the rules. Should you read the rules as written, or should you change things? Should you stay within the fiction? Perhaps you should let the elements drive the story forward. The book also covers topics such as when to make rolls, or when to give automatic successes. You also have information on character knowledge versus player knowledge, so that the story is not ruined and there is a degree of believability. You also have more information on personal events, how to handle those, minor events and epic events as well, how to involve the players, how to handle time and rate of events and resolving conflicts, of course. You also have game master tips to better handle meta play knowledge, how to create compelling heroes and non-player characters, how to deal with skills that seem to cover everything and skills that seem to be too specific. There are also narrative rules that could streamline things. You can handle conflicts as conflict pools, as large obstacles. You basically create a difficulty level and the players just need to roll enough successes to overcome that obstacle. Now, I'm not a fan of streamlining things too much, but for those of you that want to focus completely on the story, handle it as a sort of perhaps storytelling experience, or if you want to introduce new players to role-playing games, this is a great way to do it in the easiest way possible. And there's still quite a bit of structure to it. You divide conflicts by degrees of threats, such as alpha conflicts, beta conflicts, epsilon conflicts, etc. And they all give a dice pool. They all give difficulties that the players need to overcome. There are also details on how to track conflicts, how to weave them into good narrative actions and planning ahead, how to escalate and regenerate such conflicts if they appear later on in the scenario or in the campaign. And I think this is a good emergency measure to take if things suddenly spiral out of control. Maybe there are just too many conflicts happening at once in social situations, in military type of operations, and this is a good way to streamline things right away in case you just need to focus on key moments or key encounters. That way you could play out just certain situations in a more detailed way and handle the rest of them in this streamlined type of subsystem. And on the other extreme of things, you even have simulation optional rules. This creates more linear playstyles and focuses on momentary events rather than the story as a whole, so this adds more granularity to the entire thing. This affects character creation, ignoring nature of each character, and adding more individuality for each skill rather than assigning each skill to a stat. Each skill would be rolled individually. You also have more details on combat. For example, initiative. All players take an initiative action before an encounter starts. You need to track ammunition separately. Each shot counts. You have more details on overheating. You also have information how to modify reflex actions and how to remove heroic moves, while the entire combat still feels coherent. So this is basically an entire toolkit to make the game a bit more specific, more robust in certain aspects, and a bit more loose in terms of favoring the story. And that's not all. For those of you that want to create the perfect Robotech experience, or for those that have just begun playing role-playing games, you have an entire section detailing example of play, with information how to build events, how to set up things, how to handle each of the phases. All of this is a sort of tutorial to show you how a Robotech game could proceed. So this is excellent. This is actually magnificent for someone who has just started playing. And for those of us that are veterans, it's going to help us become Robotech masters, no pun intended. And lastly, we have the scenarios. I'm going to avoid covering these scenarios because there are going to be a lot of spoilers, and I know a lot of players are going to be watching this review and they just want to create a character and experience Robotech with all of its plot twists and drama. And let me tell you that the entirety of this period of Robotech is going to be detailed in these scenarios. So if you wanted to experience Robotech before watching the anime or reading the manga, this is a great way to do it, via interaction with the story. So you have a complete timeline from the moment that robot technology was discovered and how the conflict started to develop, all of the more dramatic twists and turns, how some characters are going to die, the different vehicles that are being used, diplomatic encounters, and all-out war situations. They are all detailed here. You can choose to play as one of the main characters because remember, we have the profiles for each of the characters earlier in the book. But if you wanted to replace some of those characters, or perhaps create your character and fight alongside those important personalities in Robotech, you can do so. You could even become the main character instead. And this truly adds tremendous value to this rulebook. This campaign is going to last you, at the very least, if you decide to explore every aspect of each of these scenarios, this will last you a year easily. Even the more hardcore players, if they are true Robotech fans, or they want to explore the entirety of the Robotech universe, at least as presented in this period of the timeline, this could last between 1 to 2 years. Casual players, they are easily going to extend this for about 2 years if they play perhaps 3 or 2 times per month. There's just so much value here.
Blessed with strong hearts that beat as one, watch us soar. And with love that conquers all, we'll win this battle. This last battle, we will win. We must win. We will win.
So what do I think of Robotech, the Macross Saga role-playing game? Well, first of all, this is one of the best RPG rulebooks that I have read, mostly because of all of the details, the structure, the optional rules, and the complete campaign. It's insane how much value they put into this, how much effort. So it's obvious that the designers are just in love with Robotech. The system itself, it's quite structured, more on the crunchy side, but with those rules that streamline things. This is also available for those that do not enjoy that type of rule set, and for those of you that want to modify things, tweak certain parts of the system or add more detail to them, you have optional rules for that. So this feels like the ultimate Robotech toolkit. Now, I really don't want to make the comparison but I really must because it highlights the best things that I consider of the Robotech role-playing game. As I went through the rulebook, I kept thinking about Mechaton. A lot of you know that Mechaton is basically the pioneer of mecha role-playing games. And while that system still stands the test of time, there are many things that felt too generic and not specifically geared towards anime. You had like a hint, a flavor of anime, but with the Robotech role-playing game, in its current edition, its current incarnation, this truly feels geared towards the drama and the conflicts of the Robotech Saga. You feel like social situations matter just as much as military type of encounters. That is, the matters of the heart will have an impact on battle, and likewise, perhaps some things that are experienced in battle could solve problems in social situations or perhaps even worsen them. So rather than a contrast between war and peace, there is an interlocking of the conflict and the resolution in any sort of situation, in any sort of environment. And while the system is robust, complex, has a lot of depth to it, it contains all the information to take someone who has never played role-playing games before and get them into the saga immediately. So if you are a fan of anime, of Robotech specifically, and you have never played tabletop role-playing games, this book is going to get you into it. The detailed character profiles, the example of gameplay, all the different aspects of character creation, the way how the combat system rewards tactical planning and strategies, targeting those areas in your enemy's vehicle or perhaps in the enemy itself that could give you advantage in combat instead of just hitting your enemy and waiting for the enemy to hit you. It's all about repositioning the enemy and moving yourself behind cover or in more favorable conditions. Working with the environment thanks to the equipment suits, you can interact with any sort of area or zone you are moving through. And with the many optional rules, you can make the experience as heroic or as gritty as you want. Indeed, it is a book with a great introduction to Robotech and role-playing games in general, with a perfectly detailed list of skills and talents, with information on both the United Earth Defense Forces, that is the humans, and the Centredi, conflict resolution and conflict generation with the drama system, and with complete scenarios to play through the entire Robotech saga, at least as detailed in this core rulebook. My highest recommendation: you should buy Robotech, the role-playing game. This is the perfect holiday gift for any Robotech fan, and give it to yourself as well. If you love Robotech, you should definitely get this rulebook. Remember that it's going to be on a physical format as well. It's going to be printed pretty soon. And so whether you choose it as a digital book or as a physical book, you will not regret getting this core rulebook. In fact, I think this system is so good that I would love to see it applied to, for example, Gundam. Maybe by modifying some things about heroic moves, probably being able to carry out more heroic moves per round, and adding a system to represent those new type abilities. This could work great. I know it will be quite difficult to get your hands on the license of Gundam, but if this team of designers ever got their hands on Gundam, I know that they would do a great job as well. Well, it also depends if they are fans of Gundam, but when it comes to Robotech, this is the best way of experiencing the drama, the stories, the conflict, the essence of war and peace in a more interactive way. When compared to just watching how things unfold, here you get to say how things will proceed through the entire saga. Well, thanks for watching my review, and thank you so much for those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending their DriveThruRPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to send a DriveThruRPG gift certificate will be in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching this review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.